Hey guys, and welcome back to Supernatural Saturday. My name's Coco, and every Saturday I sit down and talk about some kind of paranormal location, haunted location, or just unexplained event. And today, you can tell by the title, we are talking about Poveglia Island, which is in between, it's a small island off the coast of Italy, and it's in between Venice and Lido in the Venetian Lagoon in northern Italy. And it is also rumored to be the most haunted island, not only in Europe, but also the entire world. And when you take a look at the history, it's really no wonder why it's so haunted. It's seen everything from plague victims to battles under Napoleon to mental asylums, and it's just so ripe for hauntings, and it's really no wonder why the locals refuse to go near this island. So let's go ahead and dive right into the history. This island was first reported to have inhabitants in 421 AD, and these people were actually, it already started on kind of a sour note. These people were fleeing Germanic and Hun barbarian hordes at the time. They were looking for someplace safe to go, and they found this little island, and they thought it would be really easy to defend against invaders, and it's so small, it's not really even worth capturing in a war. So they figured they would be safe, and for a while they were doing great. Their population grew and everything was looking up. In 1379, these people ended up being evacuated because another war was on the horizon, and they intended to use this land as one of 4 surviving octagonal forts in the area to use as fortification, just as protection during this wartime. So for centuries, this little island ended up sitting abandoned, and of course Chief's gonna get up right now. Like I said, every episode. So, like I said, after this, it really sat abandoned for centuries, and it was kind of used as a dumping ground for victims of the bubonic plague, trying to get them off of the mainland to this little uninhabited island. And then in 1776, it ended up being appointed as a quarantine station, also called a lazaretto. I'm sure my inner Italian is shrieking right now. My maiden name is Sorrentino, and my ancestors are rolling over in their grave at how terrible that pronunciation was. Now, what these were, they were really just checkpoints for ships going to and coming from Venice to protect Venice from the plague. And it really, they would just look at the people and the goods, make sure they weren't exhibiting symptoms of the plague, and grant them to leave or not. If they were deemed to possibly have the plague, they had to stay on the island for 40 days. And at the end of this 40-day stay, they would determine if you were healthy enough to leave or if you were going to live out the remainder of your short amount of days on this island. Now, fun fact, well, not quite a fun fact, interesting fact. The word quarantine actually came about because of these little stations that Italy had, because in Italian, the word for 40 days, which is the amount of time they were quarantined on this island, was 40 giorni, which literally just means 40 days. And that's just very interesting. Figured I'd throw it in there. In 1793, 2 ships ended up coming into this quarantine station, and so many people on these boats were exhibiting symptoms of the plague, and it was just too risky to have anybody from this island come back at this point. So the whole island got put on shutdown. Everybody was quarantined. Nobody was allowed to leave at this point. And it really stayed like that for a while until 1814. And during this time, they were still taking plague victims and people exhibiting symptoms of the plague from the mainland, shipping them to this island, and they were sent here to die. They did not have a chance of escaping or getting off or ever coming home. They were just sent there to be put in a mass burial pit and burned. And many of these victims were even burned alive. They were just too sick and too weak to protest and claw their way out of these pits, and they would just throw them in with the other plague victims and light them all up, trying to stop the spread of the plague. And that's just a horrible, horrible way to go. You can see why this island has reports of being haunted, because that's such a sudden and horrific way to meet the end of your days. Because of these burn pits, it's also rumored, this is just a rumor, this is not actually scientifically proven, but it's rumored that the topsoil on this island is 50% human ash from all of these burn pits. It is also rumored that up to 160,000 people met their end in this kind of a way, and up to 160,000 people were on this island to die. Now, recently mass graves have been found on surrounding islands that were also used as quarantine stations, but Poveglia has yet to be searched, and I would assume it's because of just the state that the island is in. It's really beyond repair at this point. So many decrepit buildings and all of the burn pits, and it's in a horrible state. It's probably not worth it to go in there and dig up to find bodies. They might release the plague back into the air. It's probably just not really worth it. That's why they haven't investigated it, but I would be curious to see how many burn pits were on this island. So after this, like I said, this continued until about 1814, and it sat abandoned again until Napoleon decided he wanted to use the island as weapon storage, and he ended up converting the old bell tower of the church into a lighthouse, and it was supposed to be a secret. Nobody was supposed to know that he was having all of these weapons on this little island, and once word got out, a lot of battles took place and a lot of death happened on this island. Yet again, so much death. This island is just a magnet for death at this point, and there were a lot of battles and skirmishes fought on this little island for this weapon storage. Now, again, it sat abandoned until 1922, and this is when it ended up being converted, all of the buildings on the island, converted into a mental asylum, which, no secret, at the time was a horrific place to be sent, and people were sent there for really no reason as well. Sometimes they weren't even mentally ill. Women were sent there for literally no reason. If they were determined to be hysterical, they would be sent to an insane asylum, and the methods and the treatments that were used were so inhumane. Everybody knows about the electroshock treatments, the lobotomies, just tying you down because you're being hysterical, and it was an absolute torture house. And for this island in particular, it was even worse, because there's rumored to have been a doctor here who was just horrific, and he was experimenting and torturing these patients, and he had no care in the world for numbing the area using any kind of anesthetizing medicines, and he did not take care of sanitary practices. He didn't care if he was using dirty instruments. The instruments he used for the last patient, just wipe them down and use them again. And even for the lobotomies, he was not using the instruments you're supposed to use. He was using regular hammers and nails and chisels, and not even medical devices. And he was just going to town. And most of these experiments weren't taking place in the asylum itself. He probably knew that this was not recommended, and he was taking these experiments to the old bell tower, which was converted into a lighthouse, but that's where the vast majority of these experiments took place. And it's also where he ended up meeting his end, and there are two rumors as to what happened to this man. The first is he just kind of went crazy himself, driven a little mad by the island, and took a swan dive off the top of the bell tower, where he ended up dying from his injuries. The other rumor is a little bit more paranormal. There is a rumor that this man was seeing spirits and entities, and believing that he himself was going crazy, was driving more and more experiments. He was trying to find how to heal himself. And that's why he was just going crazy, just doing experiments left and right on all of these patients, trying to find a way to heal himself. And someone's walking in the hallway. Neighbor dog going wild. Chief, do you want to go to your crate? Appearance. He's a cutie. He's also a giant baby. 80 pounds of lap dog, huh, buddy? Okay. All right, buddy. All right, figure out your life. Figure out your life. Where are you going? Where are you going? Yeah. What are you looking at? So these rumors of this doctor, sorry for the interruption. The rumors of this doctor, he's gonna be squeaky. He's not laying down yet. Chief, lay down. So the rumors of this doctor seeing these spirits and apparitions actually might have some truth in reality, because at the time when these mentally ill patients were coming to this hospital, there were reports of spirits seeing apparitions. People were saying they weren't able to sleep at night because they were hearing disembodied voices and moaning and screaming, and they were immediately dismissed because these people were crazy. They were mentally ill and they must be imagining it. But when the doctor started seeing these himself, he started thinking that he was going mad. And in the end, there's really no witnesses to his jump or fall. We don't know if he was pushed or what could have happened. Maybe even one of the mentally ill patients had enough of his experiments and threw him off the roof. We don't know. But there was a nurse who witnessed his fall. And she said, she swore on her life that when he landed, he was still alive for a little bit and he was gasping for breath, kind of gurgling. She said that a fog-like apparition surrounded him and started swirling around him and then entered his body and stole his last breath, and that is when he died. Interesting stuff. It's also rumored that he is still bricked up inside the bell tower to this day. Now, it stayed as a mental health facility, kind of slash nursing home, end of care home until 1968 when it was officially shut down, and then briefly after this the island was used for agriculture before that also became abandoned, and the island has been off limits ever since. And that is when the real rumors started just flowing, and the locals of the towns surrounding this island refuse to go near it. Now, there is a museum that you can go and check out. Eventually, I would love to go, and it is actually inside the remains of an insane asylum on San Servolo Island, and it is a museum of these quarantine stations and all of these islands surrounding, and it has artifacts from all of these islands. It seems super interesting. I would love to go one day. But just because this place is illegal, it does not stop people from going. There are videos on YouTube where people illegally get to this island. Not recommended, but people still do it, and there are so many buildings that are still technically up. They're just very decrepit. Those include the cabana, the insane asylum itself, the church, housing for the staff, and the bell tower. But the bell tower is bricked up. You cannot get inside this bell tower. And like I said, the island is just falling apart. Nobody tends to it. It's not being kept up. So the buildings have been completely reclaimed by nature. They're just falling apart, and there's trees and vines on the inside and the outside of these buildings. They're just completely covered, and it gives such an eerie feeling. And there's even inside the asylum, there are so many just artifacts and left behind items from when it was an asylum, including wheelchairs and the beds and the shower curtains and the surgical tables, just everything you can imagine. It's like they just up and abandoned it as quickly as possible without even taking care to remove any of their items. Now, because of the state it's in, it's also reported to just have this smell of decay, and it's probably from all the mildew and mold from the buildings, and possibly from the thousands and thousands of bodies that are buried on this island, and it just smells of rot. There are also rabbits that apparently freely roam this island. I don't know why, but they apparently are there. There's also apparently a lot of albino rabbits, which just kind of adds to the creep factor for me. That's just a very interesting thing that there's so many albino rabbits just hopping around this island. So if you're brave enough to go, and if you're luckily enough or unluckily enough to avoid the boats that are surrounding this island patrolling to make sure people can't go, there are so many just paranormal experiences that are said to have happened on this island and even off of the island. It's said that you can hear screaming and moaning even as you're approaching the island. It's said that you can hear a bell from the bell tower chiming in the middle of the night, but that bell has long since been removed. It's said that people have been pushed, scratched, grabbed, everything you could imagine. People say, the fishermen that surround the island say that they have seen mysterious lights in the middle of the night that have seemingly no explanation. The island doesn't have electricity anymore. It's not lit, and there's all these strange lights and orbs that form in the middle of the night. It's also said that once you actually step foot on the island, you have this instant feeling of just sorrow and dread, and it's supposed to be just overwhelming. And it's really no surprise, because that's probably the feeling of so many people on this island. They knew that they were never going to get off, being just either so sick from the plague, knowing that you're about to be thrown in a pit and lit on fire, literally, or you're in this insane asylum and you're being tortured by this evil doctor who's just doing all of these inhumane things, or even dying in the battles under Napoleon's rule. Just so much sorrow and just so much sadness on this island, and people say that when they set foot on it, they just feel all of that. It's just a very, very heavy feeling when you set foot there, and it's said that they have this instant feeling that they want to get out. You want to leave, you want to flee, you want to run, which is probably the feeling that so many people had on this island. They just wanted to get out and see the world again, and they knew that they were never going to get that chance. There's also one person who reportedly went onto the island, and when he began exploring, he went into the insane asylum, and he was greeted by a very loud, disembodied voice that apparently told him, leave and never come back. Which kind of reminds me of Scar from The Lion King, so we'll take that one with a grain of salt, but it could be real. Would be interesting if he had actual video proof, but he doesn't. There is also a rumor of a family that wanted to, I found this story so many times, but I never found like actual proof that it happened. But supposedly there was a family who was looking to buy this island and use it as a vacation home. They wanted to kind of clear out and just build this fantastic home on it as a vacation place, and they decided to go spend the night there, and they lasted one night before fleeing and vowing to never return, and they never spoke of their time on the island. They refused to talk about that night, and when they came back, their daughter had such a large gash on her face that it required 20 stitches, and there are rumors that it was caused by some kind of unseen force. Now, whether or not that's true, or whether it was a little girl playing where she shouldn't have been playing in these old decrepit buildings and slipped, maybe, but it's fun to think about the paranormal aspect if that is true. But like I said, those are just rumors, and I was not able to completely corroborate this story. Now, this island still sits abandoned to this day, and it's still illegal to go there. I would not recommend going there, but there are a lot of videos of explorations, people going there, and you can look those up on YouTube. They're pretty interesting. Also, Ghost Hunters did an episode there that is very entertaining. I don't necessarily believe in all of the ghost hunters story. I think it's a lot fabricated for TV, but it's still very, very fun to watch. I do love watching ghost hunters. I've loved it since I was a kid. So what do y'all think, since this island is so full of death and misery and sorrow? Do you think this place is actually haunted by the spirits of all who came there to die? Or do you think it's all a myth? I hope you enjoyed this Supernatural Saturday, and I hope to see you next week for another one. Y'all have a fantastic weekend, and I'll hope to see you next week. Bye!